Councilmember Shane McFarland has our prayer and pledge this evening. Mr. McFarland, the birthday boy, Monday. Happy birthday this week. So we're very proud of you, and we'd sing for you, but we're not going to. So
I appreciate that. Bow your heads. Father, I thank you for this day and the chance that we get to come together as a council and make decisions to make Murfreesboro a better place. Lord, you know the cries of our hearts. You know what's in our minds. And, Lord, we just pray for those that need your guidance, that they're able to get that. Lord, I thank you for what you're doing in this community, how you've blessed this community and how you've blessed the people here. Lord, we just ask that you watch over our service providers. You watch over our men and women who are in the military, especially with the turmoil that's overseas now. Lord, help us make decisions that will make this city a better place. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome to the Murfreesboro City Council, August the 8th, 2013. Let me turn on my little brain here. Couple of announcements. We did have a stakeholder meeting regarding an ordinance to secondhand dealers and their amendments. And the proposed amendments to that ordinance and some comments are available on the city's website. And we are seeking public input on this secondhand dealer ordinance and trying to get that before August the 14th. So the website has some instructions for submitting comments regarding a secondhand dealer's ordinance. Those are folks who buy and sell directly from the public items, and they also buy and sell items from manufacturers and others, and that's a second-hand ordinance. So if you have some interest in that or just want to check out what's going on, please go to the city's website, www.murfreesborotn.gov, and find some information and also submit any comments you may have regarding that second-hand dealer ordinance. Also, property owners and residents in the Pennington Drive and Olin Taylor Street area. That's in the northwest of Murfreesboro, to the west of the Big Bow Turn and Thompson Lane. There will be a kind of a meeting, a public meeting has been scheduled at Lighthouse Baptist Church, that's on Thompson Lane, on August the 13th to review some proposed improvements in the Pennington Drive and Olin Taylor Street area. If you would come by any time between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. at your convenience, there'll be a short presentation at 5:30 at Lighthouse Baptist Church, and that's on Thompson Lane, and that'll be regarding some drainage improvements proposed for the area at Pennington Drive and along Olin Taylor Street. So I hope people will take advantage of that opportunity to get out and kind of see what's going on in the northwest side. A couple of things that presentations to make tonight. We've got two very special young people here, council members, excluding you, all of you young people. So I'm going to step down and ask the Vice Mayor to take the chair while we make some presentations. Ms. Logan, you want to start?
Sir, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and council members. The first of our presentations tonight is, we've always known that Murfreesboro is a city full of champions, and we've got two of them here in our presence tonight that are from some very special young champions. For those of you who are familiar with AAU, the Amateur Athletic Union, I don't know, AAU something. I know lots of parents know what it is. It is very well known for all of the different sports, and we have with us tonight two very important winners concerning that. The first is that we have Wyatt McLemore. Wyatt is a one-time national champion and two-time state champion, including this year for wrestling, and his brother Brody McLemore is a regional placeholder and was third in this year's state championships. So we want the mayor's got some special certificates to give them tonight.
I'm not going to get too close to you guys because you might get me in a half Nelson or a full Nelson. So I want to see Wyatt. Congratulations on 2013 state champion. And these are AAU wrestling competition, and we are particularly proud of you. And we want to get a picture if we can. Can you turn right over here? This fellow's going to take your picture. Let's get around that. There you go with Mother and Daddy. And we've got Grandpa and Grandma here, too, so that's even better. Okay, good. And guess who's next? Why don't you step over there and let the big brothers move over here? I'm sorry, Brody, I was teasing you. Come on. Here we go. Brody, third in the state. Congratulations, and a regional champion, too, right here. And they are outstanding participants at our Rutherford County Boys and Girls Club, too, right?
Yep.
And we're very proud of both of you, and let's give them a round of applause. Congratulations. There you go. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Appreciate you bringing them tonight and being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're free to go or free to stay, whatever you want to do. Shannon, do you want to do a couple of other things while you've got me down here?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening again. We're proud tonight to present another STARS Award winner. This is our August STARS Award winner, and this award winner is someone who works in our senior center. And we have, I think, one of the best senior centers out there, and it's a very important, vital part of our community. If Miss Lynn Graves would please come to the podium. Lynn was nominated by a member of the public, and she was called our city's Florence Nightingale. She said that the member of the public said she is tireless in providing relevant medical and wellness information. She goes the extra mile to support us. She encourages us, and she nurtures our body, minds, and spirits. And I think that's very special. And when I informed Lynn of her award and being named the August Stars, her response was, "I love my job." And so I thought that was a very special response. And her department head, Miss Linda Burt, who is our senior center director, is also here tonight. So with that, I will let the mayor present her with our August Stars Award winner.
Lynn, congratulations. We are very proud of our senior center and everyone who works there, and you're a special addition to that staff. So thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you can say a few things.
Well, I'd just like to say good evening to everyone. It's an honor and a privilege to have a job that you love and enjoy going to every day. And I think, this job allows me to serve our senior population, those who work tirelessly for years, and veterans and so forth. Now we are to honor them and we are to serve them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And one more, if I could, I'd like to ask Melissa Wright if she would come down, please. If you could leave your numbers at your desk and come on down here. And this is a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. It is awarded to the City of Murfreesboro by the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada, and it is awarded for comprehensive annual financial report. It is the highest form of recognition in the area of governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by a government and its management. And this award and the plaque will be coming to Melissa B. Wright, who is the City Recorder, Finance Director for the City of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We're not proud of anybody as much as we are of you as taxpayers and those who look to government accounting and having Murfreesboro be the best. Thank you, Melissa, very, very much. Thank you. She is so bashful, I know, but day in, day out, she provides us with the best, and we certainly appreciate it, Melissa. We thank you for your service, your continued service, and I think most of us would like for you to be here forever, if you can. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a good team.
All right. Council members, are there any other announcements that can be made at this time? If not, you have your consent agenda before you. If there are any questions regarding any of the items on the consent agenda, now would be a great time to bring those up. Are there any? If not, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as it's presented?
So moved.
Thank you. Ms. Harris and Mr. Gilly. Thank you. Please call the roll. Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. You also have the minutes of the July 25th, 2013 meeting before you. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes as they are presented?
Move for approval.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McFarland
Second.
and Ms. Harris. And Ms. Machota, thank you for those minutes. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland. Mr. Smotherman. Vice Mayor Washington. Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time we'll consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to rezone an area located along Memorial Boulevard to Highway Commercial CH District and Commercial Fringe CF District.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gilly. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Washington, thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider for passage again on third and final reading an ordinance amending a PRD located along Memorial Boulevard.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Gilly and Mr. Washington, thank you. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll hear from the Planning Director with regards to a study of multiple family developments and relationship with schools. Mr. Adelot. Also, we'll consider for passage on first reading, following that presentation, an ordinance to rezone an area located along Manson Pike to residential multifamily 16 RM16 district. Mr. Adelot, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Bragg, members of the council. During its meeting on May 16th of 2013, the City Council conducted a public hearing regarding a rezoned application for approximately 39.8 acres along Manson Pike to be rezoned from RS15 and CL to RM16. During this public hearing, the council heard testimony regarding the impact of apartments upon the city and county schools and the concern that multiple family dwellings do not generate adequate taxes to offset the cost of providing services to them. Council deferred action so that the planning staff could prepare a report. We have prepared a report. It was included in your agenda materials. I did not intend to present the entire report verbatim, but I will be glad to answer your questions.
All right. Are there any questions for Mr. Adelot regarding the study? Mr. Adelot, let me ask you a couple of questions, and I've had some mail and email. Haven't had any snail mail, but I've had some email. Regarding particular neighborhoods. When you average out, for instance, the town as a whole, looking at that study, is that the way this study looked, as all of the incorporated limits, or did it try to look at neighborhoods near schools or near old schools or near new schools? How was it kind of presented as a whole?
The study looked citywide, but it also looked into all of the school zones. We broke down the analysis by the, actually we took a look at the enrollment in each school zoning, and then we took a look at the number of multifamily students in the school zones. There is a spreadsheet in the study that breaks that down.
And would that, because of newer schools and persons moving into newer areas, would that show a kind of an uptick of children in a newer district or a newer school zone, do you feel like, as opposed to an older settled neighborhood with perhaps rental single-family dwellings as opposed to newer single-family dwellings that are probably home ownership?
Well, certainly the growth of the community year by year, and with the construction of each school, the dynamics change with new school zones that are reformed and reshaped. And also, one multifamily complex can change the numbers quite a bit because of the number of units that may be in one. For instance, a multifamily complex with 360 units would be comparable to a rather large subdivision, akin to something like Berkshire, in terms of the number of dwelling units. Perhaps not the number of students, but in terms of the number of dwelling units.
And in the past, has the city not seen an absorption period after an apartment or several apartment complexes were built? And that absorption period could be 3 years or 4 years or 5 years before another set of apartments were built. And now we seem to, as we're kind of coming out of a national dip known as the most recent recession, are we seeing just an exorbitant number, I mean an unsustainable number of interest in multifamily in our community?
No, sir. I mean, you asked a couple of different questions, so right. I need to answer them a little bit different. But one of the things that's about multifamily is that it's cyclical. It doesn't happen in a straight line pattern. We will see a series of apartment complexes come in, and then that will change the dynamics. There'll be a period of absorption, but also a period in which there is a hesitancy of lenders to finance these types of developments. Obviously, they take quite a bit of money to develop. Some of these cost upwards of $30 million to purchase the land, build the buildings, and get them up to speed. So a lender is going to be very cautious. They're going to be taking a very careful look at what's on the market. In fact, I'm already beginning to hear that the new complexes that were gearing up, that had not yet broke ground, are kind of taking a little bit of a breather just to see what these new ones. We've got a couple that are under construction. They've kind of beat the others. And then once they got into construction, the ones that hadn't quite got to that point are taking a little bit of a step back to see where things are going to be. The building permit information that I send to you as an annual report shows very clearly that the multifamily will spike. There'll be a year where we'll have maybe 700 or 800, maybe 1,000, even 1,200 apartment units built. Then followed by a year where there's zero, maybe 2 years, zero. And then it will spike back up with a couple of complexes. So it's highly variable. Mayor, you asked a couple other questions, and I may have gotten distracted and didn't quite catch them, so you may need to prompt me again if I didn't quite answer you.
Well, I'm just wondering, because of new school districts versus old school, or existing of those that have been 20 years, 15 years been there, because the demographics at the time those schools were built and the residential housing around those schools, primarily single-family dwellings, and now we're seeing schools that are being built and multifamily is being proposed close by. Because of demographics and people being a little hesitant to purchase a home and wanting not to take that risk where they're interested more in renting, are we going to see more apartments with more children compared to what we've seen in the past? Is that,
Mayor, I think we will.
Is that a trend?
I think we will, but I don't think it's going to be dramatic. Part of our historically, the multifamily patterns have revolved around the university. We've had a tremendous amount of housing in the area around Reeves Rogers, what was Reeves Rogers Elementary, what's now the Oakland High School area. The area around Old Las Casas, New Las Casas Highway. Not all of that serves only university students. It serves beyond them. But at the same time, it's had obviously you can look at the numbers, there's more apartments in that part of our community even today. But there's not a whole lot of new apartments being built in that part of our community that don't serve university students. That area has always had an appeal for those who wanted to construct housing for the students because of the university's policies not to house students on campus. Some of the other areas, I think there are different forces that are driving the creation of these apartment complexes. I don't think it has only to do with schools. I think it has to do with availability of land and accessibility to the interstate. I think back about a company that develops multifamily housing, something they were telling me, that at first a lot of the people that they rent to, there will be either Nashville residents who are coming out here thinking that they're living in the country in Murfreesboro, what we think of as the center of Murfreesboro, they think is in the country. Another group will be people who are moving here, finding jobs, and are looking for the home that they will ultimately purchase. That second group will often have children. And, I can think of a lot of examples. Mr. Lyons, when he moved here, he moved into an apartment, and he lived there until his new house was built. He was able to purchase it. And that's a very, very common story that we see here as we see employment bringing people to our community. A lot of that is what a lot of these new complexes are around the accessible to the interstate. And I think they are interested in being near good schools because I think they are conscious of that when they're coming here. Some people are moving here because they want to be near Siegel or they want to be near Blackman, and if they can find an apartment to live in until they can build their home in that school district, that would be what they would want to do.
And the lot availability, where we're seeing the interest in these multifamily developments, what kind of lot availability is available today?
Well, we have
for
quite a number of
single-family dwellings.
The greatest amount of lot availability is still in the area to the west of Interstate 24. And also we see a lot of the land that is poised for continued development. The recession that we've experienced as a nation put a damper on creation of all housing. And many subdivisions that were ongoing sort of pulled back for a period. That area around Highway 99, the area around Highway 96, the Blackman area, the Salem Pike area, both of those have a lot of land, a lot of subdivisions that are poised for development or for continued development. Probably more than any other parts of our community.
And those are single-family?
Yes, sir.
Not multifamily?
Predominantly single-family.
So would multifamily lead single-family, or we see multifamily after single-family, and then once the absorption takes place, is there any methodology or connection between?
This calendar year, we may see the number of multifamily units exceed or equal the number of single-family. Next year, I do not think we will. I think we'll see a clear lead in the single-family. And that's very typical of what we're seeing in our annually with the multifamily versus single-family construction. They rarely peak in the same year as both of them are very high numbers.
Other questions? Yes, Mr. McFarland, comments.
Mayor, I just got a few comments, and I first of all, Mr. Adelot, and specifically, I don't think he's here, but Mr. Blomley for putting this report together. And is baby Blomley been born yet?
Well, that is part of the story about this report. Mr. Blomley was working on this report. It was his assignment, and as he was waiting for information from the county schools, his wife, of course, announced that they would have a specific date of delivery, and that was Wednesday. And it was Nathan Thomas Blomley.
All right.
He's about 8 pounds, 12 ounces, a proud mother, a proud father, and a healthy baby.
Well, I can remember that. That yesterday was our anniversary, so I can remember that date pretty easy. I've tried to really sit down and especially as I got your report, to really go through and look at the numbers, and really this would be more looking at the information that you've put together regarding the school system, but also try to look at it more in an overview of where the community is right now. And I think is what I've looked at and come to the conclusion that I think the city and the council, the planning staff, we've got a decision that we have to make. Historically, our multifamily has been segmented. And I think you look at Las Casas Highway, when I was in college, it was old Las Casas Highway. That was where a lot of the newer developments like Center Point, and then we got into the townhomes where you had the single level apartments or economy apartments that you could get. So it's been cyclical on looking at whether it's segmented to Las Casas Highway to Rutherford Boulevard to, and we've gotten further out Rutherford Boulevard now. Las Casas Highway, Northfield Boulevard, and then we've gone out where Church Street and the original, I think, the apartment that everyone would sort of look as the leader was Chelsea Place. That was considered the nicest one, and even Le Beau Chateau. I remember being in school. That was considered one of the nice apartments. So when I look at this report and I see that we have 1,986 units under construction, and then we have 8,103 total. When I look at what's been approved or what's been calculated that possibly could be built. I think I calculated that right, Mr. Adelot. I'm not going to subscribe to the theory that apartments or multifamily should be market-driven. I could probably go through many things as a council that we would look at and say, well, we could probably allow hundreds of these, but we as a city have said, no, we're not going to do that. So, the part that I look at and I'm very concerned with is not where we are right now. I think we need to be concerned where we're going to be 20 years from now. And I remember in the early 80s and late 90s that Harding Place in Antioch, that was the nicest place you could go to. We drove by there the other day and talked about how nice the mall was and about when we were growing up, that was just the place you'd want to go Christmas shopping. Even coming from East Tennessee, that was the place. And the multifamily back then, that was the nicest multifamily that was around. And 20 years later or 30 years later, now we see where all the multifamily that's around the Hickory Hollow Mall, all the multifamily that's around Harding Place, that there's some issues now. And I'm not saying that I'm not for multifamily complexes, because I think that in any community that's a good segment to have. But I don't know how the reason I think that the multifamily, and this is just my opinion, that the multifamily is coming to Murfreesboro is because there's not people who work in Nashville don't want to live on Harding Place. They don't want to live at Hickory Hollow in Antioch. There's not hardly any complexes on that interstate in Smyrna. There's none on, very, very few on the interstate at Laverne. So the next exit coming down is Medical Center Parkway in that Blackman area. So that's why it's migrating this way. There's very few apartment complexes that are being built in Franklin, Brentwood, and Cool Springs when you drive and look at that area. So what place do they want to come? And it's Murfreesboro. So I'm not against apartments, but we need as a council, in my opinion, to say when is enough, or when are we front-loading too many projects. 7-8 years ago, alley-loaded product, that was the new thing that came in, and Three Rivers came along and they alley-loaded product. It came from Memphis. That was a great product to have. And now we're seeing that the market didn't absorb alley-loaded products. I would say the 3 successful alley-loaded product projects would be Forest Oaks, Carriage House, and Stratford Hall. Those are the 3 that we've had that I would say are successful, true pride that they've succeeded. So all I'm saying is we just need to be careful. And taking the school impact aside, when you look at that number, that's sort of daunting when you look at 8,000 units that we've got sitting out there. And maybe we only develop 3,000 in a year, but it's still out there. So that's my soapbox.
Well, and the single-family market struggles after 20 years also. I mean, if you think about it, you can say that the apartment complexes struggle, but multifamily, but single-family does in those areas also at the same time.
Yeah, and I think the single-family, the reason why you're seeing apartment complexes, and I think if you talk to any developer or builder, and I feel like that I've got pretty good knowledge in this area, that the reason that we're seeing a lag in single-family developments is because there's not many banks who want to loan money on development loans out there right now. That's where it is. So that's, and I think until we work on that, that's another issue we're going to have to work on. But I don't want to be robbing Peter to pay Paul, to say just because we don't have a lot of single family. Let's load up on multifamily.
Well, based on what I read in the national media, if they take Freddie and
That's a point. That's a point.
Fannie out of the mix,
That's a point.
there's going to be even less single family. I mean, it's going to be really testy on getting a mortgage loan. So, all right. Well, other questions for Mr. Adelot regarding the study?
Mr. Adelot, I know you didn't take into consideration on the study the effects of those students who come from apartments and multifamily as to the impact they have on the schools. But I know that in a couple of the emails that I've received, there seems to be a bit of a feeling that because people come from single-family dwellings that they have the capacity to be smarter than other people. And honestly, I kind of found that to be a bit pompous and arrogant to believe that just because somebody comes from a multifamily dwelling that somehow there is a relationship to their ability to learn. Also, there's no area in Murfreesboro that truly is exempt from this growth of apartment complex. Someone made the comment in one of their letters that they wouldn't do this next to Siegel. Well, the truth is we are doing this right next to Siegel Elementary at this time, aren't we?
Well, you just passed it on third and final reading tonight.
Right. And down the road on Compton Road, we're doing the very same thing. And now towards Woodbury Road or John Bragg Highway, we're doing the same thing. So it's not a particular area that's being picked on, although it does seem like here lately there's been one by the Western School that seemed to have some resistance, and of course this one. But isn't it a reality that it's kind of a supply and demand thing, that when we look at housing, that basically people will build what people are desiring? Isn't that the case?
That's the way I've always pretty much picked up on it.
And the reality of it truly is, once these apartments are built, we really don't know who's going to rent those apartments until somebody shows up at the door there and says, I'm looking for an apartment.
That's correct. And I would point out to tell you that one thing we do have to be conscious of is fair housing, and not to be discriminatory about who we exclude by the standards that we adopt. I think that's something we've as a community have been conscious of through the years.
Around the corner from my house, we've got Haynes Manor Apartments at Northfield, on Northfield. And Northfield Elementary School, I drive through their traffic on a regular basis, and the reality of it is I see hardly ever anybody walking across the street, the children walking across the street, and certainly they would walk across the street if they lived there and use that school, because there's a line sitting there, a long line of traffic lined up of single-family owners, I'm assuming, that come out of the neighborhoods that drive to that school. But I find it interesting that somehow we know exactly what's going to happen in the future, when the reality of it is we have very little control over it as far as who actually moves into those apartments. And the reason that, I'm assuming that it's probably more economic than anything. And as the economy continues to recover, or we hope it continues to recover, I think there will be more demand for single family, but if you can't afford it, you just can't afford it. And so I guess I've expressed how I feel. Thank you.
To just kind of maybe add something to this discussion about housing creation, what we're seeing right now is something I didn't expect to see during my tenure, and that is that our lot inventory is down to about 950 single-family lots that are available for construction today. There are several, quite a number of lots that are in the process of being worked on, but it will be the number of lots that will go into construction and be built out this year will be more than what will be brought into the inventory. So we'll have a net loss of lot availability. 958 is the lowest number of lots in inventory we've had in over 25 years now. I just didn't expect that. That represents about 2 years of development, maybe only about a year and a half of development at the rate that we're going now. We're issuing 40 to 60 permits a month now. so it goes up pretty quick. What we're seeing is smaller subdivisions, and not as many, but we're seeing small subdivisions. And when I say small, I'm not talking about the size of the lots, I'm just talking about the number of lots. And it may be between 10 and 20. That's what we're seeing.
And
so I expect we're going to be seeing quite a number of subdivisions next year come through the planning and review process, because every developer and builder I'm talking about to is telling me they've got something they're working on, because they've got to. If they're going to continue to be in the business, they've got to do something to have lots to build.
And
to meet
that's
the demand.
primarily driven by the economy, because the larger subdivisions and the ones who were more aggressive didn't have the ability to finish out their neighborhoods because they had bit off more than they could chew, so to speak. And I think that was kind of the trend that we've seen lately is the subdivisions that are being developed certainly have a lower volume of lots than what we've traditionally saw.
A lot of that's bank determined, wouldn't it be, Mr. Adlai?
I'd say it absolutely is. It's what the banks are willing to lend. They
Which I don't
don't
think
want to
is
have such a
necessarily-
large amount of exposure and risk.
Which I don't think that's necessarily determined by the banks. I think that's determined by the examiners and whoever else comes in to say, we're not going to allow you to lend on that.
Which goes back to what Tommy said about Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac and their ability to make those at-risk loans. So
It's possibly going to tighten up. Plus, we demographically know that people who went through the recession and lost money owning a home or couldn't sell it for what they had in it are not going to try to be burned again. Especially with the in-migration for job creation that we have, they're going to try to make sure that job works out, that they've moved here and that they've got a great place for their family to live without taking on the risk of a mortgage and a home ownership when they can have a nice apartment to live in. I mean, we could take a study right here, and I bet you everybody in this room has rented at one time or another. I mean, that's...
And I don't, Mayor, I don't think anyone on the council wants to come off that there's something wrong with apartments. I don't. I mean, this is coming from someone who grew up in a trailer, so I can't say there's anything wrong with apartments. But the part, and especially the apartment complexes that are being built, the tide has gotten higher on what you have to build to be able to rent.
They're pretty sweet.
But
They look pretty better.
and hopefully, Mayor, with your plan that we've talked about in the budgeting process, to be able to have a long-range plan to say this is where we are. I think the Blackman Land Use Study is a tool that's in our kit that we use, and I equate it to an axe that we have, but it's an old axe that may need to be sharpened, and that's the part that I'm scared about, because we're zoning and approving a lot of things in mass. So.
And Shane's exactly right, but I do think that even though I sometimes am concerned when we change the zoning of a property that we kind of give the ability to not have a planned unit development in front of us where we could say this is what we really want to see built on that property. I think we're giving that away, but at the same time, it still has to come back to the Planning Commission, and you guys are going to look at it and determine whether or not it's appropriate for that neighborhood. And certainly there's always taken into consideration the height of the building, whether it's looking over someone's fence, whether or not the lights from the property will penetrate over onto someone else's property, whether or not there will be noise impact that will take place of where the dumpster goes, and all those things are taken into consideration. So it's not just a turning over of saying, okay, you can go build apartments on it, and there's no supervision of it. We still have that control with our Planning Commission. So I think we're safer than some are leading us to believe in a sense, as far as the protection of the neighborhoods that these apartments are located next to.
All right. Anything else on the study?
Thank you for spending as much time and effort as you guys put into that, especially Mr. Blomley. So,
And you might mention why we're not having a public hearing on this second item at this time, why we're not having a public hearing.
Well, two reasons. One, we've already had a public hearing on the matter of the zoning, and this matter was deferred. so it's now before you to take action. The second reason is it was simply not advertised for one, and there was no indication on the part of the council that it desired to have one.
So on the rezoning, we've already had the public hearing.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Actually, already been through two, one at the planning commission, one at our level as well. Council.
Okay. All right, council members, you have before you to consider for passage on first reading this ordinance to rezone an area located along Manson Pike to residential multifamily 16 RM16 district. Is there a motion?
Move for passage.
Second.
Mr. Smotherman, Mr. Washington, thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
No.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, pursuant to Public Chapter 1101 of 1998, enacted by the General Assembly, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider annexation progress reports for approximately 12.94 acres north of Franklin Road and east of Veterans Parkway, effective for at least 6 months. Notice of said public hearing was published in the July 21st, 2013 issue of a local newspaper. Mr. Lewis, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Public Chapter 1101 of 1998, enacted by the General Assembly, requires that 6 months after the effective date of an annexation and annually thereafter until services have been extended according to such plan, a municipality must publish in a newspaper of general circulation a progress report for the extension of those services and any changes proposed therein. The law further requires that the legislative body of the municipality hold a public hearing on such progress reports after a publication of notice in the newspaper. The annexation ordinance for the area described below in your agenda materials has been effective for at least 6 months. The area includes, or there is, the annexation request is 2010-501, approximately 12.94 acres, which is north of Franklin Road and east of Veterans Parkway. The effective date was October the 16th, 2010. The planning staff recommends that the City Council conduct a public hearing on this matter to consider progress reports of the plan of services for this area. Attached is a copy of the progress report and an illustration of the area. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Mr. Lewis before I open the public hearing? If not, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Anyone wishing to speak regarding these plan of services, please step to the microphone, give us your name and address.
Hello, my name is Jeff Rainwater. I live at 1030 Bringston Run. I'd like to talk a little bit about the services provided to this area and how it broadly actually applies to how this area will be coming into the city, along with the services provided in the general area. So the first service I want to talk about is the schools, which is very appropriate considering we just had a study here presented by Mr. Adlott. Living in the close vicinity to this area, with the severe overcrowding in the schools and everything, I'm a little concerned about the city's capability, or that the city hasn't necessarily taken into consideration how bringing in more land into the city like this, and along with all the other actions they've taken with approving overwhelming number of apartments and so forth, is going to impact the ability of the city along with the county together to provide the services of schools. Right now, Blackman School is way overcrowded, and the city is building a new school. However, if everything goes as basically planned around this area, that school is going to be fairly populated not long after it opens, if there are things built around it, like the apartments that are approved. There'll be several hundred students automatically day one. If they're built, probably more like over the next 3 years. So I'm very concerned about, as we look at that, and as the study was presented as a 0.11 student per apartment, as that comes into play with providing the service, that's not the case for Blackman. It's really a 0.28 if you look at those specific ones in the area. So the impact on the schools is even greater than what they have, so providing the service in this area is going to be even more difficult. Not to mention there's even some in the area that are 0.44. So as this area grows and everything around the annexations in this area, I think we'll have a severe problem trying to put schools to them. We'll continue to see overcrowding in this area. Along with the other areas, as we bring these areas into the city, and as we bring more areas in right next to them, and it has to go together, we have to look at this holistically. You've got a lot of things that are proposed to be built when there's a ton of inventory already in the city. I think just right down from this exact piece of property, there's another apartment complex proposed. It's going to be pretty difficult if all those are built out to provide all the services. Traffic's also going to become an issue because of what's going on in this specific area. Highway 96 is already very difficult in this area. I know the city gets kind of handcuffed there because that is a state highway, and we're kind of hoping the state will eventually do what they've said they would do. But and being somebody that lives in Blackman and works in Franklin, it would be very nice if they would, but that's not you guys, so I won't beat you up over that one. I'll find something else, I'm sure. So, I think we need to look at that as we look at the areas we've annexed, and we look at how the new annexations fall in with this annexation. And when you look at those apartment complexes, you're just going to overload those schools even more. And as you annex areas in and people ask for those things, we have to look at what's going to be built on this property versus that property and those type things. I'm a firm believer in free market, but if you let free market go, you're not going to build. You're going to have a pretty bad area. That's why you have zoning in the first place, and only allow certain things in certain areas. And let's not get to the idea that residential is residential. We can't do that. So I'm trying to keep my comments very focused here on the annexation. I would love to tell you I love to have spoke on. I think I would let y'all know pretty openly that I was very disappointed in not having a public hearing earlier. I was not looking for a public hearing on the rezoning. I already spoke at that one. I was looking at public input on the school study. And I'm very disappointed that we didn't know that was coming down the pipe. We could advertise that and actually had some public input. I think we need to be more open as a government, not more closed, especially in a time of increasing scrutiny on governments for doing things not in the public eye. We need to take the extra effort to make sure we are. Other things that come to mind as we look at how this property comes into play, along with how it affects the entire community. There are a lot of things been said about this community over the last couple of months. This is a community that's going through a transition right now. It's one where there's a lot of single-family dwellings that are being built. It's also the only place in town where you're going to find over 3,000 approved apartments in a small square mile area. My opinion on that is, of course, enough's enough. We need to stop that. Not stop it altogether. We'll probably be able to absorb that over time. I lived in an apartment just like everybody else did. I bought a house, moved along. I am concerned on a couple other things that were said about the Planning Commission has their say on it, on what's built there, even after it's rezoned. I also know there's a big orange complex overlooking my neighborhood. Could have done a little better job there on plan design to make it blend better. So I don't put a lot of stake in that. I really think the elected officials need to take the lead there, not leave it up to a commission. I know there's two of you on there. However, it's mostly not a elected, voted on. Everybody there voted on. So I know the city council can't vote on everything, but and I am the one that said you're not doing this in Siegel, by the way. Just let everybody know. I'm not going to hide what I said. I stand by my comments. I think this was a done deal before I walked in the door. I don't appreciate that, really, but there's nothing I can do about it. The other part of it is you're not doing it next to Siegel. A handful of complexes here or there, it's not 3,200. I'm like I say, I'm very disappointed in what's going on over this rezoning, not taking into consideration the existing property owners and how things are going on in this community. I will tell you that there's very, very many people in the community, whether they're here tonight or whether it's the first day of school and they're dealing with their kids tonight. There's a lot of people very upset about it. So don't expect this is the last time you hear it. So, and when you do the next one, we'll be here too. So, and what we would like to do is have the council consider, the property rights of the owners that are already there. With, I'm not going to tell you that apartment dwellers are bad. I've lived there. I think some of them are great because they move into those and they buy my house, I move into another one. That's great. I applaud that. However, let's make sure there's at least some transition level between different housing types and things like that, because as you move up through that like everybody else, the American dream, you don't want to go backwards and live right next to the apartment you were in. You worked hard to get where you are. And Blackman's pretty much my last chance to live in Murfreesboro because I can't live on the north side. My wife and I actually looked at moving over there and building a house. That commute just won't work. not when you work in Franklin. Recruit some white-collar jobs might change. Right now, Murfreesboro has none. Well, one corporate office I can think of. Now I know that's pretty much economic, but and I'm hoping that changes. But we've laid the infrastructure, so I won't beat you up on that one because the road's there, land's there. We're trying. I get that. But I do want to tell you I'm very disappointed in how you voted. I'm also very disappointed in the fact that I read a newspaper article where people were talking it's basically a done deal. That saddens me. That's how it played out. So that's what I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Hi, my name is Stephen Blades. I live at 418 Ossabaw Drive, and I'm a new resident of the city. I'm here to talk about the services that are being talked about around Veterans Parkway and east of that, north of Old Fort Parkway, right in that area, which is right where I live. Again, part of this comes back to the schools. My daughter started the 6th grade this morning. I took her. I work at home, so it was good for me to do that. It was a long wait in line to get through there. And it's a very pretty school. It's great schools. It's part of why we moved here. We did a lot of research coming back to Tennessee. We were here for 6 years. I lived in Antioch, right over on Edmonton Pike. I moved over to Mount Juliet when our situation got a little bit better and they started to do gang tagging on Edmonton Pike. Mount Juliet was nice. Lived in a brand new apartment complex in Providence. We had about 40 kids get on the bus every morning for elementary school in this brand new complex of 300 units. And that was for elementary school. I bring that up because we just talked about the study. I was a little surprised at the study. The study totally focused on Murfreesboro and only on Murfreesboro and didn't look outside Murfreesboro at all. There are a lot of apartment complexes in Murfreesboro. I looked at the maps. I've got Appendix D open right here. And if I look at the highest concentration of complexes that show on that map, most of them aren't too far of a stone's throw from this building right here. And most of those complexes were probably built 20 and 30 years ago. And quite honestly, I don't think that they have as many school kids in them as some of these new complexes that are coming along. I'm really worried when I hear 8,000 units being put into place. I just bought a house. Went through this process, moved here a month ago. And when we came to Nashville on Mother's Day to hunt for a home and went and saw 24 different places in a single day and came all the way around from Mount Juliet and back down this way, planning to head over to Spring Hill the next day, we found this gorgeous place. We stopped and we said, this is it. And he said, well, it's good because I'm going to tell you there's not a whole lot left because they were selling like this. Our real estate agent took 15 phone calls in every place we were at. That's an exaggeration, but not too far off. So yes, things are turning around on some of those homes and home sales. I emailed each and every one of you. Mayor sent me an email back. Thank you very much. I read your email. I did take into consideration everything that you said. I understand your comments about the economy and where it's been and how the market has changed over and more people are focusing on the rental areas. And I'm not saying that that's not true. But I do think that it's going to shift again. I think it's already starting to shift again. And if you talk to any realtor in the Nashville area, I think they'll tell you that it's already shifting now, where they're starting to list things that they wouldn't have even thought of listing a year ago because nobody would have touched it, and now it's disappearing off their inventory in a week. So putting in 8,000 rental units might not necessarily be the best way to go. And it certainly will overcrowd and overpopulate the supply when the demand isn't necessarily there. And that's not going to do anything but drive down home values and overpopulate our schools. I think that the study is very well done, and there's a whole lot of work that's in there. And I don't think that it's taking into account some things like demographics and age of systems and density of these different markets and how they affect each of the individual areas that they're in. And I think that it would take a little bit more to look at areas that have been through this a little more recently than what we're seeing here and what that impact would truly mean. And that's all I have to say.
Good. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Last chance. Anybody else? If not, I'll close the public hearing at this time. And I'll ask for a motion to accept the annexation progress reports.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. McFarland. Mr. Gilly? Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider recommendations of the Transportation Director with regards to approval of a contract with Parsons Brinkerhoff Incorporated for preliminary design and environmental study for a new transit facility. Welcome, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you and good evening, Mayor Bragg, members of council. I do have this one item for you at this point in the agenda, and this deals with a contract between the city and Parsons Brinkerhoff for the preliminary, the beginning phases of something we've been working on for quite a while, and that is the construction of a new transit facility for Rover and our other public transportation venues. We've been operating out of the back of the solid waste building since the beginning of 2007 when Rover started, and have been working since that time toward relocating. I think you are well aware that that's very remote for a public transportation system. It's not accessible really to the public. And some of our services, such as ticket distribution, are somewhat disconnected to that, and we're trying to consolidate that and make that something that is convenient to the public. So over the last several years, the staff's been working to obtain a new centralized site and ultimately a new building. The project will utilize FTA funds, and as such, the project must be conducted in accordance with various federal regulations and guidelines. We have completed the first phase of the project back in 2011, wherein we undertook a transit facility needs and location assessment study. This provided a cost analysis of planning level site design, which effectively identified 9 potential sites that met minimum baseline requirements for a functional transit facility. Through a matrix evaluation process, and that looked at a lot of different things in judging one site against the other, and we ultimately resulted in the selection of locally preferred alternative. Out of those 9 sites, we did select a location that is at 615 and 625 West Main Street. You're probably not familiar with the actual address, but that is across the street from the street department and the gas distribution center down on West Main Street. We are also looking at, in conjunction with this, to make sure that they're parallel. Y'all did approve a contract on the consent agenda this evening for look at the revitalization of West Main Street, which is basically between Broad Street and the CSX railroad tracks. So we want to do this together to make sure that the decisions that are made with both would complement each other. So after the selection of this site, the next phase under our process was to begin the preliminary engineering, which is basically a 30% study, which undertakes the environmental study and the preliminary design. And we did receive 6 proposals out of a request for proposals that was issued. This was reviewed by the city's consultant evaluation committee, made up of several staff members. And based on our review of the proposals that were submitted, we did select Parsons Brinckerhoff as a preferred firm to carry out this phase of the process. The negotiated value of this proposed contract between City and Parsons is $230,592.37. The primary funding is through our federal grant funds. Being the 5307 category, this basically provides 80% of the money through the Federal Transit Administration. The state provides 10% match, and the city provides the remaining 10% match. The city has anticipated this and provided the funding in our capital improvement program, and it's also in the city's current FY14 budget. Based on this, the city's local match will be a little over $23,000 to conduct this phase of the study. With that being said, I'd recommend that the approval of the contract between the city and Parsons Brinckerhoff in the amount previously noted for the preliminary engineering and environmental phase of the study, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have concerning this matter.
Questions for Mr. Richardson regarding this recommendation? Are there any questions? Then is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gilley. Mr. Washington, please call the roll. Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilley?
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye. Do you have another item under other business that you would like to do now? May I, Ms. McGann?
If you will give me a second to get my other folder, I would be happy to present it.
All right, time's up.
Ms. McGann's twitching over there.
It was something else. It
That's
wasn't-
right, yeah.
It certainly wasn't anything the mayor might do.
Thank you again for the opportunity, and also for letting me in front of Mr. Gore.
I knew you wanted that.
Does he have a PowerPoint?
That's much appreciated.
Yeah, you got a PowerPoint?
No, sir.
Okay.
But I bet Mr. Gore does. The second item that was to be conducted under other business is an item dealing with the purchase and installation of an intelligent transportation system, a GPS system for our public transportation fleet. This was handed out to you by special delivery today, and we would typically have not done this under other business, but time is of the essence, and we have some time constraints dealing with our federal funding source. And as such, we wanted to get this before council so that we could move forward with implementation of this. This is a project that we've been working on for quite a while. It is something funded under the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, also known as the stimulus funds. This is 100% federal funding, and we do have programmed $300,000 for the purchase of our ITS and GPS system for our buses. This will provide us several different things, such as real-time bus location information tied to online mapping, information board to transfer center. We have the ability to tie into phone apps and stuff, and the basic purpose of a lot of this is so that we are able to communicate with the public where the buses are, whether they're late. As an example, we have people call in the office all the time and say, I'm standing on the corner of the road. Well, the million-dollar question is the bus on its way to you, or is it just left you? With this, we would be able to pinpoint that and be able to give information to the people who call in. They'd also be able to do that on their phones, and it's something that is typically associated with public transportation. It's a very good system. The project was originally let to bid in March 13, and we received bids on April 22nd. We did receive 3 bids, and those are noted in the memo. Route Match provided a bid in the amount of $194,745, Strategic Mapping $299,773, and Trapeze Software $299,934. After receipt of the bids submitted, Route Match was notified that their bid was deemed non-responsive. There were some issues with the things that they bid and their apparent interpretation of some of the specifications. And in reviewing they did file a protest, and reviewing the protest of parent low bidder, the Transportation Department, the ID Department, and the Legal Department jointly reviewed the bid submittals, the written basis for the protest, and the original bid specifications. Based on the apparent differing interpretations of one of the critical items, bid supported by the highly varied bid prices and technical submitters by the bidders, the general consensus of staff was that clarification of specification was in fact warranted, and as such all bids were rejected. The specifications were clarified and the project was rebid May the 20th of this year. The second bids were received on June the 3rd from the same companies that submitted the first bids. The bids received, at this point in time, Route Match was $212,881, Trapeze Software was $239,782, and Strategic Mapping was $248,973. Although Route Match was a parent low bidder, they were again deemed non-responsive, and this was for a totally separate reason, and that was for failing to return all the bid forms contained in the ITB and failing to bid all the equipment quantities specified in the actual bid proposal. Trapeze Software, and this starts to get a little complicated, but bear with me, is the next lowest and most responsive bidder. Each bidder was notified of the staff's intent to recommend award of the contract to Trapeze Software Group as the next lowest bidder and responsive bidder. On July the 29th of this year, Strategic Mapping filed a written bid protest with the city recorder. The general basis of Strategic Mapping's protest is that the project should not have been rebid and that the apparent low bidder, Route Match, should have been disqualified, and thus Strategic Mapping as the second low bidder in the first bid should have been awarded the bid as the lowest compliant bidder. The Transportation Department, in consultation with the city's IT and legal departments, have reviewed and evaluated all 3 bids. In addition, city staff has reviewed Strategic Mapping's written protest. In accordance with regulations, the FTA Region 4 office has been informed of the protest. Based on the review and analysis of the bids submittals, the city has determined that the lowest and most responsible bidder to be Trapeze Software Group in the amount of $239,782, and staff has concluded that the protest filed by Strategic Mapping is without merit. You've also been provided a written legal opinion from our city attorney and staff attorney that elaborates as to this issue and provides a more in-depth articulation of the issues, and they're both, I think, here and willing to answer any questions you may have about the opinion that was issued. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Richardson regarding this recommendation?
Yeah, I don't think I've gotten there yet, Mayor.
Well, I thought you'd finished yours on. I'm sorry, I had my fingers crossed.
I'm going as fast as I can. Funding, as mentioned, for the project is 100% ARA funds, and part of the time constraints that we were talking about, the funds are required to be utilized and closed out by the FTA by September the 30th. A time extension waiver has been requested by the Transportation Department, extending this date for closeout until November the 15th of 2013, and we are still working very much toward receipt of that waiver. And the project is, as a concurrence, we do have to put this in a regional budget, is contained in the MPO's Regional Transportation Improvement Program budget, and also we do have an FTA grant for expenditure of the funds. At this point, I would recommend that the City Council approve this contract between the City of Murfreesboro and Trapeze Software Group and authorize the mayor to execute this contract contingent upon the Federal Transit Administration's approval of the waiver request for the time extension on behalf of the city. With that complexity being stated, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you got, or you can direct them to our legal department.
I reiterate, are there any questions or comments regarding this recommendation? If not, is there a motion?
Move for approval, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Gilly.
Second.
Second?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Smotherman.
Mayor?
Yes.
For clarification, is the motion to both parts of it to reject the bid protest and award the contract?
Correct.
I think we need formal action on the bid protest as part of
Do
the
you want
motion.
those as separate motions?
No, not as separate motions, but I just wanted to be clear that that was encompassed.
Was that your intent?
It is.
Was that your intent on the second, Mr. Smotherman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Richardson.
To Mr. Gore.
Anything else? At this time, we will consider recommendations of the Water and Sewer Board with regards to bids for the Southwest Regional Forced Main. Mr. Gore, welcome.
Mayor, City Council, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to come before you tonight to present this item. I've got two items. You split this up, but basically I'd like to recommend the award of the bid, and then I'd like to take the council through a quick windshield survey of the project via our GIS mapping, just so you'll kind of see the expansiveness of this project, and you'll understand that if there's calls, you're going to see we're going from Old Fort Parkway all the way up to the north end of town with a 36-inch pipe. So I'd just like to give you that little windshield survey first, or secondly. But first off, Water and Sewer Department received bids on July 16th. We had 6 bidders. Smith, Segment, and Reed recommended that Garney Company, with their bid of $8,303,095, that they were the most responsive and are qualified to do the work. So we would recommend awarding that bid to Garney Companies. That is $2 million under the estimate. That's $2 million. We had $10.3 million estimated for that project, and we got $8.3 million bid.
Excellent.
I heard you the first time. It just sounded so good.
It warranted another playback. Thank you.
Move for approval.
Second.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. McGannon.
Can you do that in the form of approving the resolution, which is 13R22, which would be approving the award of the contract, so that you don't have to vote on it twice?
Well, I just wanted to vote on it twice because we were saving $2 million. I thought it was the right thing to do.
I'm happy for the council to vote as often as the council wants.
Was that a motion by Mr. McFarland?
Yeah, I'll wait until the resolution comes up.
And was there a second by Mr. Washington? Is that correct?
It was.
All right, go ahead. Proceed, Mr. Gore.
Okay. Thank you, Susan. I did have a note here that I was supposed to remind the council of the resolution on the approval, so excuse me. If we can start the presentation. To zoom in here, basically, I'm showing the three projects that were, or the four projects that we have on our 5-year CIP that are expected to incur debt. The Southwest Regional Pump Station, and you can see the Southwest Regional Force Main is highlighted. Those have come in at both of those around $17 million and what was estimated at 20.7. So we have about a $3.7 million savings. We are going to be bidding the headworks next week. That is projected at 12.7. We're hoping that that comes in lower than estimated as well. But to take you through the extent of these projects, we start in the Old Fort Parkway area. The red line that you see is basically the route of the force main. The pump station is just south of Old Fort Parkway, across from the golf course. We do have that is a very large pump station that's receiving all the sewage from the south side of town and pumping that directly to the wastewater plant off of Blanton Drive. You see the dashed line, that is area that we've already, our forces installed the 36-inch force main before the tennis courts were built. So that pipe is existing. It was laid by our operation and maintenance crew. We then go around the 14th green on Old Fort Parkway. We cross the river. We will have to go under Medical Center Parkway. And we do have an area on Searcy Street and Toon Avenue that you can see here where we are going down that roadway. So we will have some significant construction activities in that small neighborhood. Our operation and maintenance folks have been are going to be coordinating with the contractor to make sure that all water and sewer services are maintained while that large force main is going through that area. That area is on conventional sewer, and there are water lines in that road, and it's going to be a tough coordination effort, but I think everybody's eyes are wide open to that. We then go through the Gateway area. We're coming through this area where it's the old city landfill. We have worked with TDEC with the help of Mr. Huddleston to mitigate how we are going to repair the cap of the old landfill when we put that force main through that area. We then go, it's kind of a large area here. You can see from the north down to this, the northeast or northwest to southeast. That's about 9,000 feet along Old Nashville Highway that this force main will be installed in one lane of Old Nashville Highway. 9,000 feet is just under, it's about 1.8 miles. We have worked with the Rutherford County Roadway Board to get approval to put that in there, and we have worked with the National Park Service to make sure we're trying to do that in the wintertime when there's less tourism at the park, and construct that 36-inch line during the winter months.
Where is it going to go?
Down Old Nashville Highway.
In the lane or? In
the lane. We have specified that the contractor is to keep one lane open and basically bring the road back to a passable each day, not to leave any open trenches or any open hazards out there. You can then see we're kind of, this is the Horde, we're crossing the railroad and New Nashville Highway and getting onto the Horde property, and then we come up to the wastewater plant, which is just here at the end of Blanton Drive. That force main this is the project I mentioned earlier that we're going to be bringing up next, probably in another month or so. We're bidding it next week, but it has to go before our Water and Sewer Board. It's the new Headworks facility, which is basically, this is just a schematic where we have a screening, grit removal, and a washing station basically at the plant. So that's just to give you an overall idea of where we start, the route we have to take, and where we finish. That's just because it's going to be, this is probably going to be a 2-year process. The pump station can't start until the force main is built, the Headworks, and the Headworks facility is complete. So it's an entire system. Garney Companies has gotten the bid for the pump station and force main. We hope that they give us a good price to get the Headworks as well. That way coordination would be with one contractor versus now it would be maximum of 2. So we're looking forward to receiving those bids next week.
And Mayor, obviously with a project that can be this disruptive, we'll be working hard to communicate with the public to let them know where construction is going to be taking place, through social media, the city's website, and press releases, so we can advise drivers where the work's going to be located.
And the reason we're doing this, just briefly?
It's basically to increase the capacity along the entire south and west side of the city. This trunk line, actually, the project we have currently going on, we call it our 70-1 interceptor that is coming across. You may see some equipment staged there at Bubba's on South Church Street, and it goes behind Pillsbury General Mills, and then it actually terminates at the end of Indian Hills Golf Course. That's a 30-inch gravity sewer extension that is there to receive all of the Joe B. Jackson corridor. The new Joe B. Jackson that's coming back into town actually goes all the way down to Buchanan Estates and that Buchanan interchange. That sewer, it feeds all through up the Middle Fork, follows the West Fork, and will come to this the Southwest Regional Pump Station. So it's a regional pump station that services a lot of area.
All right. Any other questions regarding this recommendation and the resolution?
Since it's in the winter, will it be any nighttime work at all? Or?
Well, we obviously put in our specs that they're to abide by the city ordinance, the work hours. We told them if there are road crossings or if there are areas that are sensitive, maybe outside of a populated area, that we would work with them during nighttime hours.
She'll be out there with a flashlight.
Yeah, that's right.
Mr. Gore, you may have said, and I probably missed, about how long does this project go from start to finish?
Well, we're hoping to have this completed probably around this time, 2015. It's going to be, by the time you build the pump station, force main, and headworks, we're hoping that we can get it between 2.5 years. Construction is obviously, that's weather dependent, and a lot of, we seem to hit a lot of sinkholes intermittently along routes, but optimistically, we've got a good contractor. They do good work, so I'm thinking 2 years.
Other questions, comments? So I'm assuming, Mr. McFarland, you want to renew your motion, and Mr. Washington, you want to renew your second. Is that correct?
Yes.
For the resolution. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Buchanan. Any questions, comments regarding the motion? If not, please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Gore. All right. This resolution, consider for adoption a resolution approving Chapter 21 of the Private Acts of 2013. Ms. McGannon?
Mayor Bragg, members of the council, you will recall that you asked the General Assembly to pass private acts amending the city charter relative to purchasing in several respects. A copy of what you asked for and what they granted you is attached to the resolution. It's Private Chapter 21 of the Acts of 2013. That does not become effective unless and until two-thirds of the council approves it, and we notify the state that you have chosen to approve it. The recommendation is that you go ahead and approve those changes to the city charter. The expectation is that at a future date, staff will be coming back to you with ordinance or resolution or a combination thereof to implement the additional power that this charter amendment gives you.
Move for approval.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. McFarland.
Second.
Mr. Gilly seconds. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris. Aye. Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Beer permit applications.
Mayor, we have one tonight that is an ownership change of a restaurant at 1145 Northwest Broad Street. They have met our requirements for the background check. They have not finished their building codes inspections. I see the bottom of this form did get cut off, but that's what it was going to say. We would like to issue this permit once they have satisfied the building codes department's inspections with your approval.
All right, is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Washington. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. You have a list of the statements to be considered for payment before you. Are there any questions regarding the bills to be paid?
Move to pay the bills.
Second.
Mr. Smotherman, Mr. McFarland. Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris. Aye. Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. I do not have any board and commission appointments. Other business from staff or the council to come before the council at this time? Any other announcements? Mr. Smotherman.
I know this last Tuesday night, several of us that were out on National Night Out had a wonderful evening against crime. Had a wonderful evening out touring Patterson Park, Spring Valley, Rogers, Oaklands, and Sportscom, and had a tremendous outturning of participation from the community, and that was certainly a great thing. And I want to say thank you personally to the Murfreesboro City Police, the city schools, and the Parks and Recreation job for doing such a fantastic job of coordinating it. So thank you to them and all the volunteers who were involved.
Thank you. I'm sure all the council joins you in that big thank you for their appreciation of those volunteers that worked so hard. Thank you. Anything else from the council? Mr. Washington.
I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to take a stab at it, Ms. Harris. On the 17th at 6 o'clock, the NAACP is having their Freedom Fund banquet at 6 o'clock at the Stones River Missionary Baptist Church on Joby Jackson Parkway. As some of you in the public know, we have been addressing some issues over in the older part. You mentioned Eddie about the Patterson Park and the police department. I want to commend Chief Chrisman and Assistant Chief Bowen and Rob Lyons and the mayor. We've had conversations about how to deal with those particular issues. I normally don't go on the TV for anything, but I was rounded up and lassoed by Larry Flowers from Channel 4, and I just felt like we had to, let the public know that as unfortunate as these issues are in the community, but we're no different than anybody else, and things happen. But I can tell you right now that our police department and our council and anybody else involved in trying to get a handle on this kind of situation are doing just that, and it'll be just fine. They'll probably never go away. You're going to have sporadic times when things happen. That's the way it's been. It's happened before. We have pockets of places in the community that are a little more different than others. But I'm very tickled that our police department and administration and our council is doing what we can to address those issues so nobody feels like they have to be a hostage in their own home. That's just wrong. So, Mayor Bragg, but that Freedom Fund banquet, Mayor Bragg will be there, I will be there, probably Mr. Gels Harris will be there. And I asked the mayor to make some comments to the public because it's a public police process. It's just not the police. It's got to be a community policing and a community project. We all got to be partners in this thing. And as long as we can articulate that and get that point across to the public, it's not just about us, it's all about you too, we can get this in the bud. That's all I got to say.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Washington. Anything else? I do remind you of the secondhand dealer ordinance and the amendments and available public input till 8/14 on the city's website, and also the August 13th meeting at Lighthouse Baptist Church regarding the drainage improvements to the residences along Pennington Drive and Olin Taylor Street in Northwest Murfreesboro. Anything else? You're adjourned.